Welcome to Wild, Wise and Curious, Embracing Our Journey. This is a brand new podcast and this is our very first episode. So like anything new, or like life in general, it's always changing. On the topic of change, the podcast starts with a conversation around Second Spring Cafe, a title in the offing for being the podcast name. We obviously didn't settle on that, but found the discussion around the meaning of Second Spring quite interesting, so we left it in. The podcast then swiftly delves into our own personal experiences of perimenopause and all things peri and beyond. In future episodes, we'd love to chat with women just like you who might like to share your own perimeno or post-menopause journeys with us. We really look forward to chatting with you.
So why did you pick Second Spring Cafe? What was it that...
I think it was the whole idea of like your second spring being that time in life where you actually get a chance to look at who you are and what you're doing and whether who you are and what you're doing aligns with who you actually really want to be.
Okay, so when you first said this to me, when you
Yeah.
first said Second Spring Cafe, I just thought, oh God, old people.
No, totally
Do
get it.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So I
It's
almost
like Golden Girls.
Well, yeah, but I don't mind. Golden Girl's great, but what it did bring up for me is like, okay, so I just almost like deconstructed that. What does that mean? I love the cafe bit because it's you know, is getting together and having a chat. Second spring, and I was kind of, and I was looking forward to us having a conversation about this because I was like, second spring, but how many periods of my life have I had? And I was thinking about breaking those all down. And certainly with like perimenopause and menopause, you know, we talk about our hormones fluctuating at 3 specific periods of our lives as women. So we've got the obviously we've got puberty, pregnancy if we have a pregnancy, and then perimenopause, the 3 Ps, and that's something that Lisa Mosconi talks about in her book. And so then the Second Spring Cafe kind of thing, for me, it was like, okay, so second spring, and it's that, okay, so we've got all this time up to this period in our life, and now we're going to go and have the next period of our lives. So I was just kind of interested into what brought you to that particular name. Was it literally? If it was just literally, I think you know, I just was thinking about, you know, that period of my life, and is that what sprung up for you? So maybe it's not second spring, maybe it's just Spring Cafe. Maybe if we look at it as in like the if we're looking at the seasons.
You
know.
I know what you're saying about second spring. I think it's in China where they call it second spring, and they actually embrace the change that comes during these times, and it's actually viewed as a positive life stage and kind of looked up to, almost like a wise woman, like, you know, in some of the other places around the world. But I just feel that here we certainly, like on the television shows that we see, when we look at any representation of like menopause, post-menopause, there's not a sight on perimenopause. And let's face it, perimenopause is the run-up, and post-menopause is after, you know, you've had your year of no period. And I've totally gone off.
No, but that's absolutely, and I completely get that, and I actually really like that, and now you've said that, it makes me feel like, okay, that makes sense for me now. And I can almost buy into that to some degree. But isn't that just, I think that's really reflective of how we feel in this culture about women as they get older, which is really interesting for the start.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really interesting. I think there's obviously an awful lot more work being done around women in perimenopause, in menopause, post-menopause. You know, you've only got to look at the likes of Davina, who's banging the drum, which is, you know, it's been fantastic, you know, lifting this kind of myth of, you know, of HRT always being bad. You know, I mean, my mum, and I know she won't mind me saying it, but her parents, you know, when the report came out about the HRT and stuff being really, really bad, her parents made her promise that she'd never go on HRT.
Oh, wow.
You know, and so she's never gone onto it. And yet, you know, it might have helped with certain things, rheumatoid arthritis, and, you know, she gets a lot of aches and a lot of pains. You know, so I think people talking about it, I mean, it's hard when you're kind of like, I don't know if you get this, Lou, but like, I'm in loads of like perimenopause and menopause groups on social media.
Yep.
And so my social media is totally swamped with perimenopause and menopause. My bookshelves are swamped with perimenopause and menopause.
Me too.
Books. So
I feel like all I'm doing is listening to stuff, watching stuff, reading stuff all about perimenopause.
Exactly. And so in my head, the whole world is talking about perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
But actually, it still isn't. And I feel like as women, we've had a real disservice because, you know, we all go for our, you know, 3 yearly smear tests and talk to our the nurse, doctor, whoever's doing it. And we've actually, I don't need that person to talk to me about a holiday or, you know, what I'm doing with my life. What I'd love is for them to sort of like say, oh, have you noticed any of these symptoms? You know, you kind of gone past your mid-30s, you know, have you noticed anything to do, you know, do you feel anxious at all, or are you feeling panicky, or, you know, are you having hot sweats? How are your periods? You know, how's your mental capacity? Do you feel, if somebody kind of started the subject, you know, started talking about it, having the conversation, I just feel that we would be so much more aware of what to do once we are in, for example, perimenopause. I say perimenopause because of my own experience. I didn't understand what was going on. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown, or, you know, what they call it, a mental health crisis now. And I just felt like I was sliding off the planet. If somebody would have just said to me, oh, you could experience quite severe anxiety and panic attacks, but don't worry about it, it's totally natural and we can certainly help you, I wouldn't have suffered. And I think there must be so many women out there that are suffering needlessly.
I think the issue that we've got is that a lot of stuff with the health service is very reactive.
Yeah,
it has to be reactive, really, because there's so much pressure there.
Of course.
And I think this is why conversations like this are really valuable, because it opens up the conversation more, so we understand more, but also I'm going to take it back to my first time, and it was when I met you at the park. You were running around the park, and you were telling me about how you'd been on HRT, and I hadn't even given perimenopause a thought. I've lived with anxiety and depression most of my life, so when I have blips, I just put them down to that, almost. Then it was soon after that I started getting really hot sweats at night time, you know, like ridiculously so, and that was waking me up. And the conversation that you and I had got,
sorry, the dog's snoring.
The conversation that you and I had kind of came to my mind, and I was like, oh, maybe that's what it is. And it was almost like once I'd got the hot sweats, it was like, yeah, that's definitely what it is. But up to that period, I didn't think it was. I was just living it as it was my normal. I was going through my normal blips. And so then to start thinking, oh, actually, it could be something else, that was quite pivotal for me. So you were quite pivotal in that point. But yeah, I've gone off track.
But it's true though. It's almost like you need someone to sort of help steer you. And I guess that's where our podcast is kind of, you know, hopefully might be of some help to other people going through this time. And obviously we're not going to be all sort of like doom and gloom and looking at all the negative sides, because as we've discovered, there are so many pluses to being at this stage. but yeah, I mean, one of the things, like you said, seeing me when I was out running, I don't run all the time. Before you start thinking that I'm like really, really super fit, I'm really not. I am working towards it. But my sister, who you also know, Maria, she's 3 years younger than us, isn't she? And she was quite pivotal for me, because she would say to me when I was struggling, and she'd say to me, you know, what about, could it be your hormones? And I was about 43, 44 at the time, Lou. So I was like, oh, don't be ridiculous. So, you know, menopause only happens at 51. It's definitely not that. I'm 43, 44. It can't be that. And I'll be really honest with you, I did not even know what perimenopause was. I had never, ever heard that word until I went to, I did go to Newson Clinic after I'd had about a year, well, about 7 or 8 months of therapy, because of the anxiety and panic attacks. And eventually my sister kind of said to me, come on, let's just go and have an appointment with them. And I had an appointment with them, and it was only really when they didn't laugh at me, obviously, because that would have made me like break down again. But it was almost laughable with how perimenopausal they thought I was.
Okay.
And so they said to me, oh my God, you know, you are so perimenopausal. The things that you're presenting with, you sent your score sheet into us, because they very much go on symptoms. They do blood tests if you want blood tests. And if you go on to have testosterone, which I do, and that made a massive... that made me, well, mentally, that was just like icing on the cake, a chocolate cake, chocolate icing with a flake and everything else on the top. It was great. I mean, for my mental health, I mean, I'd gone on the estrogen and progesterone for about 3, 4, 5 months, and I still didn't feel that my mental health had shifted. If it had, it was 5%. I went on testosterone about July time, and I remember going away for my dad's 70th, and we went away, his birthday's the end of October, we went away the first week of November, and I actually felt okay leaving the house, and I felt a lot more confident, and I was suffering less with these irrational thoughts and the panics and stuff. And I remember thinking, okay, I feel quite a bit better. When I came, while I was away, I got an email from the clinic to say, oh, your testosterone levels are still really low. We'd like to just increase your amount, tiny amount. Within about 4 weeks, I was totally back in the room and firing on all cylinders. In fact, I felt almost how I felt before I had my kids, and my eldest is 21.
Wow.
So for me, the testosterone made the whole world of difference.
Okay.
So, but you know, I know that you're on HRT as well now, aren't you? And how are you finding it?
Well, so and you and I have got this in. We're similar in this respect, is that we were trying to do everything quite naturally to start with, because
I wouldn't even take a paracetamol if I had a terrible headache. Wouldn't get on.
But trying to do everything as naturally as possible,
Absolutely.
and thinking that this is a natural part of life.
Yeah.
And you know, having conversations with like people of my mum's generation, you know, that went through it without any hitch and can't see what the issue is with us all talking about menopause now. But I think our lives have changed so much in the last couple of generations, possibly. You know, the stresses that we're being,
absolutely.
You know, with the toxins, you know, so many things that we're having, our bodies are having to deal with now that they didn't used to have to deal with. But so I did try, you know, when I realised, I was like, oh no, I can do this. I can just do this without anything. And I'm just gonna, you know, try all the aromatherapy oils and all that kind of stuff, and drinking the teas, and I did kind of start on my journey of really going back and having a look at all the basics and getting the basics right, you know, the eat, sleep, drinking water, movement, all that kind of stuff, going really back to basics. But the hot sweats were like, they were waking me up in the night, and then I couldn't get back to sleep. And then I was really struggling, because if I don't get any sleep, I am like a bear with a sore head.
Yeah, I get that.
I've always been able to sleep quite well, and I like to have a good 7 to 8 hours sleep.
Yeah, well, we need it, don't we?
Yeah. And then so then waking up, and it was like for days, and I just wouldn't get really good quality sleep. So I was doing things like taking CBD gummies, which helped initially. And and so that helped initially. So on the odd day, I'd take a CBD gummy and I'd have a good night's sleep, so then I'd be okay. But then I thought, well, I can't continue doing that. And it was getting quite bad, and I was getting really tetchy as well. And I wasn't paying attention to my cycles or anything like that. But I say I wasn't paying attention because they were quite erratic, and also I was having a period every 3 weeks, and they were really heavy, and I was like, oh, I cannot live like this. No. This is ridiculous now. And it was there was a whole host of things I hadn't realised that I hadn't put down to perimenopause. And it was only looking through. So I started using the Balance app.
Yes,
the new Clinic Balance app. And they've got a whole host of symptoms on there, and I'm like ticking them. I'm like, oh my god, I hadn't realised that is a symptom. That's a symptom. And literally everything that I've been dealing with, the dry skin, itchy skin, all these little things that I've been putting down to the fact that I've perhaps not drank enough water, or I've not had enough sleep, or
easily done,
and I'm getting older, the joint pain and that kind of thing, is actually, they're all symptoms of menopause.
Yeah, they really are.
And I hadn't realised it to what degree. And so when you're saying, they were like almost laughing to say you were perimenopausal, all these things that we just accept are part of getting older. Absolutely. Actually a symptom of perimenopause. So so it took me a while, and I did go on tablets, and literally within days I had got such stinking migraines, and I never suffer with migraines. Okay. So I was like, stuff that, I'm going to park that now. I'm not going to take those anymore, because I can deal with the symptoms better than I can deal with the migraines. And I'll just cope. And then I was getting quite low, and my husband said, well, do you think it might be time for you to try another form of HRT? And luckily I've got an amazing manager, and we'd had some really good conversations, and she said, you just need the patches. So I went to the GP and said, can I have patches? And I'd explained about not getting on with the it was the progesterone tablets I think I'd not gotten on with.
Which one was it? Was it the Utrogestin, or?
I could not tell you.
I use them, and I'm fine with them.
It was just because I was taking the progesterone tablet, because I was taking it in tablet form, that was causing the headaches apparently. So going on to the patch has completely eradicated that. So I'm on the, I can't remember what it's called. Menopause symptom. Oh, so it's the one where you go on, you've got estrogen. Is it Everil?
Oh, has it got estrogen and progesterone in the same one?
I think it's Everil Secret.
I've heard of it. Yes. Yeah.
So you have, for 2 weeks you have just estrogen, and then for 2 weeks you have estrogen and progesterone. And that seems to have been okay. My sleep has definitely improved, but there are other things that I'm doing to help with that as well. And I think the realization that this isn't just a magic patch that's going to eradicate it has been massive for me. So it's all the work that I'm doing alongside that. So as much as, things like I'd just taken for granted that I would get really bad acne. I've always, when I was younger, I used to suffer with it. And I've just gotten used to the fact that I was getting it again, but I'm not getting it anymore because I'm on the patch. So I think
that's interesting.
So all these things that I hadn't even realised were part of the symptoms. The patches helped with that. But then there's been other things. But then I wonder whether some of that also is just part of life.
Yeah, there is that element, isn't there? I think similarly to you, when I looked through the symptoms list and ticked like most of them on there, I think it was about 30 odd, isn't there? I started to realise that, okay, although I'd started to sort of go downhill with the anxiety and panics and stuff, probably in July of 2020. So obviously the world was a bit upside down anyway. But what I did was I kind of traced back, and I looked at the fact that from November the year before, so like 8-9 months before, I was starting to get tinnitus, like ringing in
Oh
my
my
ears
gosh!
constantly.
See, yes. So I have
And I never
tinnitus.
know, do you?
I didn't realise.
Yeah,
So I'd gone through lots of tests for Meniere's disease and all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. And I've just lived with tinnitus. I've just accepted that that's
yeah,
part of my life. Had not realised that that's also a symptom.
yeah.
But I've had that for years.
So, I mean, does that mean then potentially you've been going through perimenopause
Well,
for
possibly
years?
because I'm like 49 now.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, because it could have been you could have been 10 years in it.
absolutely. So I think I was being tested for things with my tinnitus probably about 5 years ago.
Okay.
So
yeah.
that really
Yeah.
well could be one of the first
Yeah,
symptoms,
that
and
you
I
had.
just accepted that
Same
was
here.
part of
So did I. I just
getting
thought,
older.
oh, exactly. And I remember the day I woke up with it, thinking, oh, normally I'll get tinnitus, but it's literally there and it's gone. And I also remember it must have been maybe a few months after that, so maybe January of 2020. I remember going back to work after Christmas and driving to work and feeling like my breathing pattern was different, and I thought, is this just like sometimes you like breathing we don't think about breathing, we just breathe, but then every now and again you have a couple of deep breaths and then you just carry on breathing as normal. But this felt like, I don't know, it was almost like a deep breath and then another deep breath, and then I was aware of my breathing, so then I was focusing on it more. And so I didn't know whether it was the fact that I was focusing on it more, that my attention was obviously going there. But then when I looked into that, you can have funny breathing patterns with perimenopause. So
and palpitations.
And palpitations. God, I had them. They were
yeah,
horrific.
Yeah, me
Absolutely
too.
awful.
And I just thought I was constantly feeling anxious.
Yeah.
Because that's the same feeling that I used to have when I was anxious. So and I would be literally sitting there thinking, well, there's nothing wrong. I'm not feeling anxious, but I've got the symptoms of being anxious. Yeah. So am I anxious?
Yeah.
And then
it just leaves you in such a wibbly wobbly. Where am I? Who am I? What's going on? But no, absolutely.
And the brain fog.
Oh my God, the brain fog. The brain
so
fog.
That alongside the brain fog as well. And I hadn't realised to the degree that I was feeling the brain fog.
Yeah.
And I think again that was a catalyst for me to then go on the patches, because I was at work and I know that I know my stuff. I was doing stuff, but I would literally not be able to access the word I needed, and it made me feel stupid, and I felt stupid, and I felt like I came across as stupid, and that made it all worse, because then I'd go red, and then I'd show the signs of being embarrassed, and and I think that was the biggest thing for me, because I've worked so hard on finding my own voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we all do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so then when I'm not able to even access the words, and then I would, I'd have a really busy day at work, and then I'd be good for nothing by the time the evening came. I wouldn't even be able to put a sentence together. And I hadn't felt that sense of it was exhaustion, but not in a like I need to go and lie down. It was just like my brain was like, you've had enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going on the patches has helped enormously, but also I think that I've worked on I'm currently working on living in my cycle, which has been absolutely transformative for me.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, and the catalyst for this was a lovely friend of mine. We were going to meet for a coffee, and we'd been talking about cycles, and and she says, "Oh, we should meet next time. What's your cycle?" And I went, are we going to be those kind of people that meet in our cycles? And I made light of it, but then it was almost like a light bulb. Oh my God, why am I not living within my cycle?
Yeah, I've not even thought about doing that.
No. And I've started tracing it. So I started to write a journal of how I was feeling. And I think because I've been so up and down, and I wanted to track my symptoms. Are they getting better? Is what I'm doing making that any better? So started tracking it a little bit more. So I started writing in the journal. So I'd literally have day one of the period, and then I'd literally track my how I was feeling, what I'd been doing, and that was really interesting. And so now I've started planning my diary around that.
Oh, okay.
So like in weeks 3 and 4, I'm really downgrading on stuff on what I'm doing. I know that I'm going to be really quite I'm going to be able to do lots of things. I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to be able to access my words better in weeks
1 and 2.
Yeah, 1 and 2.
Hopefully.
She says 1 and 2, but you know, again during that period of time.
Of course.
But it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I've pretty much got 1 week when I'm dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm amazing.
Proactive. You know exactly what you're
doing everything.
Everyone gets dinner. That's another story.
For the rest of the 3 weeks, I'm just trying to manage my life. But yeah, not making too many, not trying to do too much stuff.
Yeah.
Because then I get overwhelmed and then it becomes ridiculous. So, you know, just being able, it feels like I'm just being kind to myself. But then that week where I'm kind of getting ready just before my period, it feels like I'm giving me time.
Yeah.
So I'm like meditating in the evening. I'm drinking cacao before I go to bed, which has been helping enormously for my sleep. By the way.
I really want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I want to do it. I am going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to come and have a go at your house.
So that's been helping. Moving, you know, I'm going to exercise classes during the week. I'm going to yoga. I'm trying to do yoga more.
Yoga's amazing, isn't
it? It really is. But I think if nothing else, for being in tune with your own body,
yes,
and being curious is the word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just being curious as to what my body's feeling, what my body's needing, and I think that's just something I've never tapped into.
No, I think, you know, that thing of like, especially if you've had, if you're working, if you've had children, and regardless of, you know, what your sort of status is, whether you're married or you're not or whatever, but just kind of having to look after everybody in the family, make sure that all the cooking's done, all the cleaning's done, ordering the shopping, putting the washing machine on, collecting dirty clothes from the floor. That's knackering enough as it is. Then when you throw in working, there never seems to be much time to actually take that bit of time for yourself, does there? And it's almost like, I feel, and I know you and I have chatted about this, it's almost like this time is now for us. The kids are that bit older, so, you know, they don't rely on you so much. I mean, they still do. They still want lifts, but, you know, like we were chatting, you know, you were saying about your daughter like hoovering, I know the boys cooking dinner and stuff like that, and like they are massive helps. And then of course you've got to have a normal job, but then when you throw into that mix the perimenopausal brain fog and everything else, it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. And you know, and it just, I don't know, it's a difficult thing. So I really think that I know where I'm going with this. See, oh, bloody brain fog. So what I was trying to get to with that was that taking this time for ourselves now feels, certainly to me, almost like I need to look after Michelle. I need to make sure Michelle's okay, because there's loads of things she wants to do.
Yes.
So, you know, by going to, like, I mean, I go to yoga once a week, but the class, literally, it's £7. I walk in with all the stuff that I've carried all week, whether that's been stuff going on at work or running around after the kids or whatever. And when I walk out after, you know, it's a restorative yoga class, so I only really started in February, so we're only talking, what, 10 months or so, 9 months. But I just walk out and I feel like I'm in this lovely bubble of space for me, and I feel like it's such a treat, and it just makes me feel so much more calm and centered. And I love the fact that I've given myself that opportunity to feel that way, because it kind of reminds me that actually, Shell, you need to feel like that a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I do run around like a complete loony bin. I do, you know, and I do think a lot of us do. I'm certainly not on my own, because most of my friends run around the exact same loony bins as I am. But I think I'm just now on this journey where I feel like I want to align more with myself.
Yeah.
and what I want to do.
Yeah. And I think for me, there's an element of future proofing as well.
Absolutely.
I feel like this time, it's almost like I feel like I've been given this time to have a reset.
Yes, it's like a
and
gift.
to like it feels that way.
Yeah,
and
it
so
really does.
Initially, I was like, oh God, here we go. It's going to be years until I start to feel better again. But actually, I'm like, no, I feel like I've been given some time to really reset, like energetically, emotionally, physically. You know, what do I want to be in the future? What do I want my future to look like? And I want to be able to do the things I want to do. Absolutely. And I want my body to be able to do the things that I want to do. So I need to put some work in now, because this is probably going to be the best I've ever been if I don't make any changes. You know, so it's time now for me to make some real changes. And I feel like, you know, making sure that I'm eating better. And I think it also comes along with the being in tune with your body. So now I'm recognizing when things that I'm eating are really not doing me any good.
So you can notice, is that like within your cycle?
But generally, I feel like I'm being more in tune with my body. And I think the yoga is helping with that. I think the taking time for myself, being in tune with my cycle, I think that is all kind of helping me build this picture of what a healthy person should feel like.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's working more towards that. So like, I am no saint. So the other weekend, we had pizza and garlic bread and all that kind of stuff. The next day, I woke up and I was hurting. My body hurt. And I'd had lots of bread and stuff that weekend, not just the pizza. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been putting into my body. This is why I feel like this.
Yeah, what do I expect?
And it's almost like now I'm being given the signals. Okay, start listening now, because if you don't, then things are going to be
absolutely
even more. So then that makes me think, well, you know, my aches and pains, my joints, all that kind of stuff, is that because I've not really been paying attention to what my body's been telling me? So just trying to be more in tune, and also with the seasons, you know, being in touch with my cycle, with the seasons. I'm just trying to be a bit more in tune with everything.
So I think it's a really important point, isn't it, that this kind of like being in tune and recognizing what your body needs. And I think I totally didn't respect that in my 20s and late teens, maybe even middle teens. I just wanted to be out and party and drink and, you know, do all those sorts of things. And don't get me wrong, I don't regret it at all. I had an absolute blast and would I do it all again? Probably not all of it, but a lot of it, I probably would.
I'm exactly the same.
And so then I had the kids, and of course, you know, you're so busy running around after them that then when you sit, you'll just eat whatever it is that's in front of you, even if you've cooked it yourself. But I remember I tried really hard with, like, you know, making sure things were organic and stuff. But then it's like, one, I can't afford to have everything organic. Two, I haven't got the time. So sometimes we did have the chuck 'em in the oven dinners. We did. It's only really been more lately that I make sure more or less 90% of what we eat is you know, is fresh. It's all fresh. Having said that, I have bought some heroes for Christmas, and the other day I ate 15. And I ate 15 and I counted them, because I counted the wrappers afterwards, and then I added up the calories. 600 calories. I was like,
is it really?
Yeah, I could have had something really nice. But actually, at that point in time,
your body was asking you for that. Let's go with it.
Later on, it was saying, "What did you do that for?" But yeah, exactly, Daisy Dog, exactly. But I've been really, apart from the 15 heroes. Sorry, the dog is now dreaming
about heroes.
Probably is, if she could get her mouth round them. But a friend of mine, Joanna, she's been following this living life ultra processed free. And so I've been listening to her and another friend talking about it for quite a while. And I think it was about August time, I thought, right, do you know what? I was getting to the point where, because I was rushing around, if I was grabbing something to eat in between, I would quite often buy a bar of chocolate on the way home from school. On the way from school, on the way home from work. And sometimes I'd buy a cake. Well, I'd never been a cake buyer. And all of a sudden I just thought I was feeling more brain foggy than normal, and tired. And I was piling on the pudding. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this ultra processed, like not having anything ultra processed. So basically, obviously, all that means is looking on the label, and if there's anything on the label that you have no idea what it is, or you couldn't just buy it and shove it in the cupboard, you don't eat it. So we're basically just going back to basic food. So I started to do that, and so I started that August. So, and I bet you I've probably lost about 1.5 stone, 10 pounds. I can feel it because I was starting to get a real like belly, and I honestly, the ultra processing, I didn't really go down that route just for that. Yes, I wanted to shift it, but it was more for the fact that I felt like a slug. And I'd say that's really helped me. I know I had the heroes. I did have the heroes. I fell off the wagon.
You're a human being. You're allowed to have the heroes.
But I got back on it. I know.
Well, no, I think it's, for me, it's, I mean, I've always had not a great relationship with food and sugar in particular. Yeah. I think that's my you know, I don't really drink. I don't smoke. Yeah. You know,
well, we can't drink. What happened when we went out the other night? Two little beers, and shall we have a glass of water?
Yeah, I've always been
unlike
a cheap
our
date.
Husbands.
Yeah. I've always been a cheap date, so you know, in that respect, it's. But yeah, so sugar has always been my
kryptonite.
Drug of choice. But I think that it's, you know, I've gone past the. I know it. You know, perhaps I need to lose a few pounds, but I'm not focusing on that anymore.
No,
I'm focusing on, I need my body to be strong,
absolutely,
and healthy.
Exactly,
I need to be able to get through the next however many years I've still
50,
got
at least
on this planet.
Absolutely.
You know, if you think we are only in our midlife, if we're classing that, I don't know what the age. I think average age is in their 80s now. Women, you know, so I've got a lot of years. I need to make sure that I'm strong and healthy, and I can tie my shoelaces up.
Oh my God, absolutely. And you can go on the adventures that you want to go on.
Yes, exactly.
Still go and listen to them, you know, go to music festivals, or, you know, on your holidays, or even go for really nice walks. I want to be able to, I remember saying to Tom before, I want to be 90 odd years old cycling a bike.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't cycle a bike very often now, but when I'm in my 90s, I've got this vision of myself on a bike.
Yeah.
And I've got a basket, and I've got a beautiful old bike. And I've always had this kind of vision.
Yeah.
That when I'm old, I'll ride a bike. Yeah. I mean, I've obviously got to get on one now.
Yeah, I would suggest you do.
I think if
you want to see that vision of you in the future, you need to put the work. But this is it. It's doing the things that our future selves are going to thank us for.
And that is so, absolutely, it's so true. It's so true. And, you know, you kind of look back on things. I certainly look back on that kind of perimenopause, the early stages of perimenopause, because obviously I'm still in it. You know, I still have my periods every 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, me too.
And I never had any hot flushes. I never had anything that we're kind of like told about to look out for.
The obvious indicators,
absolutely. And so I never had any of those. So I really honestly just thought I was having a mental health crisis. But at the time, don't get me wrong, I do not ever want to go back to that time. But I've kind of, now I look at it like maybe I had to experience something like that for me to make all the positive changes that I've started to make. Because it scared the hell out of me, and to the point where, I know I don't want that to happen again. And so, like, being a bit more active, like you were saying, being a bit more active, going to yoga. I go swimming a couple of times a week. I'm even more mindful now of the people that I spend my time with.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Because we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the toxins and everything?
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's not just
it's not just in the air or in your food.
No. It's actually who you're mixing with. And I think as we get older as well, our circles get smaller because we've become a bit more picky about how we spend our time
because it becomes so precious.
It does become very precious because we've got families, you know, and they've all got needs, and we want to spend that time together, and we're very aware that our babies are now, you know, growing up so quickly, and we're not going to have this time forever. So, you know, it's prioritizing that, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely. You know, how we spend our time and who we spend our time with, and also what we're ingesting.
Oh God, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely, that's a massive thing.
That
is a massive thing. So I think when when I first started to sort of go, like, you know, downhill, as you know, for want of a better term, it was, we had COVID every day, the tolls on the news, and I was watching that, and then obviously because of where I was mentally, everything seemed to stick. It was almost like I had sticky thoughts, things that kind of ruminated and ruminated and ruminated. And I was worrying about so many things that I've always been a bit of a like, okay, let's just go for it and hope for the best. And so what you're saying there about what we ingest, I mean, to be honest, I've pretty much now, I don't really watch the news. I know that's not for everybody, but for me personally, I think it brings a much greater sense of peace. I don't need to watch the news to know that everything's not rosy in the world. And you know, I just think that for me personally, it doesn't work for me. And so where someone else might watch the news and it might not stay with them, for me it stays with me. And so I kind of choose to kind of like bring myself out of watching things like the news, and spend the time doing other things like reading books that, I don't know, make me feel alive, and make me feel like I want to go off on an adventure, or oh my God, that sounds exciting, I want to do that. I'm reading Women Who Run with the Wolves at the moment, by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and just kind of like learning about all the different archetypes of women, and all the different sort of all the different gifts that we have. And I think while I had to go through what I went through, I feel like I had to do that so that I could bring some light out with me. And the light for me certainly is becoming more of myself, remembering the things that made me happy when I was younger. I went to a speech by a guy, God, we're probably talking 30 years ago, a guy called Nick Williams, and he wrote a book called The Work We Were Born to Do. And he was talking very much about the things that made you happy as a kid, and how those things are kind of the things that you should be doing as an adult, because it's almost like we're born with these gifts. We're born loving certain things. Someone might love maths, someone might love drawing, someone might love singing, someone might love, I don't know, digging for diamonds, whatever. You know, digging for diamonds might become a coal miner. You know what I'm getting at. I like digging. But it's just kind of like saying that, you know, if you stay true to yourself, you know, I mean, we've all, I imagine most people haven't, you know, and we've all kind of deviated.
And it's really hard because we're all down the rabbit hole of having to have a mortgage, having to, you know, earn a certain amount of money. But I absolutely get what you're saying, and I try and live by that as well. And it's always, I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling in my belly.
Yes.
If I'm being drawn to something, if I'm feeling excited by something, I'm doing more of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And if for some reason something is making me feel uncomfortable, I'm having to almost unpack that. Is it fear? Because if it's fear, then maybe I need to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But if it's because this isn't the right path for me, if I know, and this all comes back to what I was saying earlier about being more in tune with myself.
Absolutely.
And being confident in my decisions and my ability to make those decisions. But yeah, it's all intertwined, isn't
Oh
it?
my goodness, it really is. I think actually that's come full circle to why I mentioned the mentioned the COVID and the anxiety and the panics and the news and the HRT and everything. I don't know where I would have been if we hadn't have gone through COVID. It might have been different for me. You know, if I could have sat like snuggled up to my mum or, you know, my sister or, you know, and just like chatted through these things, would I have gone so far into the depths? Do you know? And I'll never know.
I don't know
I'll
because
never know.
now talking to you about your experience during COVID, I had exactly the same, but I just put it down to the fact that I was panicking about COVID, and I don't know about you as well, but like for me, I mean, me and my daughter were talking about this recently. She said you went a bit, you know, crazy at that time, and I did.
Yeah.
And I said, but I feel like looking back on it, reflecting on it, it's because I felt like I was out of control and I needed to protect my family.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And I think had I just been on my own, that might have been a completely different experience. But because I felt like everything I needed to do was trying to
keep them safe.
Yeah. And I did. I went, you know, when I look back on it, and then I think, well, maybe that was part of it as well. I just assumed because I'd lived with depression and anxiety all my life to some degree, I just assumed it was part of that, and it was situational, and I was just, I remember going on the park and I had a massive panic attack.
Yep.
And I literally had to just sit and do the, you know, 4 3 2 1 technique. You know, when you think about four things you can see, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, or something like that.
Yeah.
Great technique. But I remember having to dig into that one and sit on the park because I was having a massive panic because there were just people everywhere.
Yeah.
And I won't forget that. But then I wonder, was that part of? But we'll never know. We'll never
never know.
But on reflection, and then you're looking back at all these kind of things that have happened, and you think, well, maybe it was part of that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, when it all started to kick off, I was fine, in as much as I just knew that I wanted to make sure that everything was organised, and you know, we had everything, and you know, we had everything that we needed, or we were being told that we needed. And then as I kind of slipped more off the planet, and I was worried. I was worried. This is how I think the perimenopause panic got me. I was worried if I opened my front door that somebody on the other side of the road, and like we're looking out the window now, the other side of the road has got to be 20 meters away. I was scared that somebody on the other side of the road was going to get COVID from me. I mean, it's ridiculous. It was these were the irrational thoughts.
Yeah.
Totally irrational thoughts. And like for the first few months, I was just like, you know, I was on furlough, and the weather was beautiful, and I had time with my kids. They weren't at school like all the other kids, and that was, you know, it was quite a lovely experience having that time with my kids.
Yeah.
My poor husband had to still carry on going into work every day. But then it just kind of happened. So that's kind of one of the things that makes me think I don't think it was COVID. I think it and the fact of the worrying, I just really think it was, you know. And when I sort of spoke to Newson about that, they were, it's perimenopause, you know, with the tinnitus and the breathing and the anxiety and panics and not sleeping. I think I was getting about half an hour, 40 minutes sleep a night.
Wow.
Yeah, and that went on for maybe a year.
Wow, and no one can cope with that.
No. I mean, no wonder I was a nervous wreck. I was an absolute wreck. I remember I used to, when I'd go and have my therapy sessions and stuff, I'd come home and I'd lay in the fetal position on the sofa in the smallest, I tried to get myself as small as possible. And crikey, I was I think I must have lost about 2-3 stone. Just because I wasn't hungry. I knew though, in my mind that wasn't irrational knew I had to eat. So I would always force like porridge and fruit down my neck in the morning, and make juices and eat a lunch, eat a dinner, and I'd make myself eat. But that wasn't because I wanted to, because it made me feel sick. It was more of my rational mind knows I need to do this. But yeah, it was it wasn't pleasant at all. But I really, I think what I came out of it thinking, especially with how wonderful I feel now, was I don't want anyone else to feel like that, because that was absolutely, that was horrible. It was, yeah, I just wouldn't ever want to go back there. And there must be people out there that are feeling like that and don't have to.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really important about the conversations that we're having. And like you, your sister was a catalyst for you,
Yes,
like giving you the having the conversation. You were the catalyst for me. You know, so it's we're having these conversations because, you know, like our mums had a very different experience.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So the fact that we're all having these conversations in our workplace and stuff is fantastic.
Oh, it is.
So, you know, hopefully that it will reach somebody that is like not knowing what's going on. You know, I had moments where I was thinking, am I getting really poorly?
Yes.
You know, because my memory was so bad.
Yes.
And you know, but I'm very lucky that I've got a really great support system in place, and I'm really lucky as well that I am one of those people that will literally just tell anybody anything and wear my heart on my sleeve. So we're having really good conversations at home, so that when I am having an off day, and I, you know, there's been times where I've just took myself off to bed and you know, gone off and said, right, I'm not feeling great today, so I'm just going to take myself, and that's accepted, and you know, and how wonderful is that?
Wonderful.
That's a gift.
Yes.
But the fact that we're having these conversations, hopefully more people are going to feel able to have the conversations at home as well, and say what they need, and be really vocal about what they need.
Yeah, finding your voice.
Yeah, because that's all part of it, isn't it? I feel like I spent a lot of time not knowing what my voice sounded like.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same.
Now everybody does.
Now everyone knows my voice too. And now they know our voices together. God help them.
Oh, that's a really good point for us to start wrapping up then, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah,
So,
that's
so
so
we've covered quite a lot of material. We knew we would.
But that's a really good kind of way of us explaining how we got to this point.
Absolutely. You know, and you know, we're really looking forward to where this podcast will go.
Yeah.
And one of the things we really want to do is invite other women to come and talk on the podcast and have a natter with us and talk about some of the things that they've experienced, and kind of give us any gems, any like little golden nuggets that kind of have helped them. You know, whether it's nutrition or exercise or HRT, or whether it's alternative treatments, or even vitamin, anything really. We just want women. We just all want to tell our stories.
Yeah.
And you know, listen to each other. I mean, in the old days, that's how everybody learned everything, right?
Absolutely. We're in our little communities, weren't we? And we've come away from that so much now. And I think as well, we're also very unique because our lives are very unique. So what might work for some people might not work for someone else. So I think that's one of the most important things about us all having this conversation, is that we can't just follow one person's advice, because that might not work for somebody else.
No,
so
it might not.
The fact that we intend to speak to so many different people about their experience, and share that, and honor that experience.
Oh, absolutely honor it. And you know, I mean, it's kind of I remember one of the things from sitting down with the menopause specialist, and I must have had an hour and a half of her time, and even though I was in a bad way at the time, I felt heard. And don't get me wrong, when I was on a call to my own GP, he offered me, he said, oh, do you want HRT or antidepressants? I knew I wasn't depressed. I felt like I wasn't depressed. I just felt it was something else. I didn't know what it was. But I also knew that, you know, he could probably only give me 10 minutes time. When I had that person sit with me and listen to me for an hour and a half, feeling heard, I think that was a big step towards getting better.
And that's the same regardless of whether you're young, middle-aged, or going through the perimenopause or not, isn't it? As really human beings, that's what I feel like that's what we crave, and
so hopefully, people telling their stories on the podcast will help them feel heard. Okay, well, thanks ever so much for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.